Everybody, it's time for another Advocacy with Adam. My name, of course, is Adam White, and you are going to see an update from the Alaska Airmen's Association on our government and legislative affairs activities for the month of August 2026. So I've got 2 pages worth of typed notes to go through. There's been a lot of things happening this summer, and I want to update you on as many of those things as possible. You'll notice I've got a new shirt. I was able to make it to Oshkosh this year, and one of the great things about Oshkosh, of the many wonderful things about Oshkosh, is the shirts that they've got available. You can see the EAA logo. I've been a longtime member of the EAA, as well as some other national alphabet groups, as we tend to call ourselves. But the Alaska Airmen's Association, in my opinion, and I'll admit I'm a little biased, but from a more regional, statewide perspective, has a lot of value and benefits for being a member of the Alaska Airmen's Association as well. So all that to say, member of a lot of different aviation organizations and alphabet groups, just so happen to be appreciative of EAA and the shirts that they offer at Oshkosh every year. So enough of that. Let's keep going and talking about some issues. Again, a lot of things have happened. I'm going to update you a little bit about my trip to Oshkosh and some other things that have happened in the past few weeks since we last spoke. So let's start with Lake Hood. A couple of things at Lake Hood, actually, and I'm going to reach in here and grab, and I should have done this sooner, but grab a pen so I can mark my notes when I've talked about an issue. So Lake Hood, what's going on at Lake Hood? I've had several of you reach out to me. I've heard it myself on the ATIS, on some air traffic control staffing issues at Lake Hood. You know, we've known that there's been some issues at Merrill Field, but now it seems that Lake Hood has been added to that list. There was an ATIS this past weekend, that talked about limiting departures for a short time window. To the best of my knowledge, they went back and did not do that on Saturday evening. But there have been numerous cases of when the ATIS and the controllers will tell you unable to do a Class Charlie transition coming to or from Lake Hood, and that's because of staffing issues at Anchorage International Airport. You may or may not know this, but Lake Hood Tower is co-located with Anchorage International Tower in the same exact tower cab, and the controllers that work Lake Hood also work shifts and positions for Anchorage International. So there's a lot of crossover and carryover, and sometimes the same controller working multiple positions and those things, which we're all familiar with that happening. But here this summer, they've had some staffing issues to the point where they are having to reduce some of the services. Now, the questions have been asked: what happens when they can't accommodate departures or arrivals? Can't we just go Class Echo and do what Merrill Field does when the tower's closed there? Well, it's a little bit of a different story with Lake Hood and its close proximity to Anchorage International. I've been in close communication with the Regional Administrator's Office of the FAA about this issue, trying to figure out a better path forward and how we can continue to work this. I don't have any firm answers for you right now. Just need you to know that we're working this issue. And I do appreciate several of you reaching out to me, even on the weekends, and letting me know what's happening with these things. So speaking also of Lake Hood issues, and I'm going to get out my marker and mark off things off the list as we talk about them, of course. So the smell around Lake Hood is not pleasant. That's probably the nicest way to put it. It is not pleasant. Why is it not pleasant? What's going on? A lot of you have reached out to me and complained about the floating slime and rotting vegetation. A lot of people have complained about what this is doing to their floats. There's been some concerns about increased corrosion that's happening on airframes that are in Lake Hood. And there's also talk of the smell when it comes to the de-ice fluid that runs off into Lake Hood every spring from the winter and is now decomposing. So Lake Hood Airport Management has sent out an email kind of outlining and explaining what the smell is and why there's all this dead weeds. So they used to go through with this really cool pontoon paddle wheel lawnmower, for lack of a better term, that would go around and just cut the weeds, and it would roll them up on a metal chain conveyor and then pull them out of the lake. The problem with that is some of the weeds that are in Lake Hood actually propagate when you cut them. So mowing them was actually making the problem worse, to be honest with you. And so now they've changed their tactic, and now they're putting in some herbicides into the water. Aquicides, maybe is the better term. I'm not sure which word is more appropriate there. But anyway, they are putting in a chemical at a measured dosage rate per acre of water and all those things to kill the weeds. The problem when you kill those weeds like that, they have to decompose. And so they'll float to the surface as they decompose, causing some problems with water rudder fouling. Say that fast 3 times. And then, of course, the smell of all that. It is staining the bottoms of a lot of people's floats. That is a concern. What does the chemicals of the de-ice fluid, how does that interact with the herbicides that are being put in the water? Is there some correlation to some corrosion properties that happen there? And man, that train is really loud, isn't it? You can probably even hear that over the microphone. I'm here at the airport in Nenana, but you also know we're in the rail belt, and the trains do come through here pretty regular. So apologize for that train horn. So where were we? Back to the chemical properties of these things interacting in the water. I had a long conversation with Steve McConney at the Seaplane Pilots Association while I was at Oshkosh. Steve and I have known each other for, well, I was going to say years, but I think decades would be a better and more accurate term. It's great to catch up with him again. But we talked about Lake Hood and the corrosion issue that we have been noticing there at Lake Hood. So we've got some theories. We've got some things we'd like to track and work. I'll tell you, it's not so easy to find these answers and get to the bottom of this. It's going to cost a lot of money to do some research and some testing, but there is some concerns about chemical compatibility and what is that changing in the water as far as properties of corrosion. The bigger issue and the bigger theory that we have right now is that there could be some electrical current that is leaking, to use that term, into the water because of a bad ground, a grounding rod issue, corrosion on some wiring around the lake. And it doesn't have to be anything, a live wire dumping straight into the water. It could be a bad ground rod from a building somewhere around Lake Hood. It doesn't have to be that big of a current leak, and the electrolysis that happens because of that is very difficult to troubleshoot and diagnose, and takes quite a bit of effort to track that down. That seems to be one of the working theories that we have right now when it comes to the Lake Hood issue. Know that I am working that issue. I do appreciate people reaching out to me and letting me know their individual issues and how things are going there. With all this, I strongly encourage you, if you operate on floats in and out of Lake Hood, when was the last time your IA actually did an annual inspection on your floats? When was the last time your mechanic actually physically laid eyes and hands on your floats and inspected them? Because a lot of people come on and off of floats seasonally. I know that I do, and sometimes the IA doesn't have an opportunity to see the floats at an annual inspection because when the airplane shows up, it's back on wheels. And so your IA needs to actually lay eyes and hands on your floats to be able to do that inspection. So some other things that have come up, you may have read in the media. I was quoted in several articles and news stories about the weather reporting outage that happened back in July 27th specifically, and what was going on there. More than 50 stations in Alaska went offline at the same time, and it took hours to get those back online. Well, if you didn't hear, the issue was not here in not here in Alaska, but was in the lower 48. When it came to what they call Service A, which is a component of getting that information from the weather sensors to us as the users of the system. And it was a breakdown in that chain, and they were able to restore that for the most part relatively quickly. But it does bring up the fragility of that system and the need for the improved infrastructure, all this money that's coming into the state. Matter of fact, it was just announced here recently that AT&T was given a multi-million-dollar contract with the FAA for the entire nation to update their communication infrastructure between air traffic control facilities and weather stations and all of these things. So we're getting some improvements happening. It's a slow rollout. I think once we start seeing some slow progressive changes, it's going to snowball, and we should see some improvements with that. With the AWAS, VWAS, WeatherCam, ADSB, all these new stations that are coming online here in the state, a lot of you have asked, where are these things going? Where specifically? What are the locations? And I can't tell you officially where they are because the FAA has not officially announced where they're going to be. I will remind you that I was and still am part of a working group within the FAA to make recommendations on where to put these things, and I know what that candidate list is. And the FAA has asked that we be careful how we talk about these deployments because we want to manage the public's expectations. Now, that sounds a little draconian. That sounds almost like 1984, you know, the book. It's not, okay? So the FAA is trying very hard to get these stations online, and they are still have a goal, and they think they're going to be able to achieve this goal of getting 16 new AWAS stations online in Alaska before the end of this calendar year. How many have they got online so far? Nowhere near 16. Are they going to do it? I hope they will. They're showing great promise of being able to do that. We may slip a little bit on that number, but that's the goal. And so the FAA is very hesitant to tell all of us, hey, we're going to do this, 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 and this, and it's going to happen on this date. We all know that here in Alaska, timelines like that are very difficult to manage. Things happen. Supply chain issues, weather issues. You get to a remote site and you thought you had everything that you needed, only to realize that the ground that you thought was maybe rocky is now muskeg. And so how are you going to fix that? What are you going to do for that? So, you know, that's just an example. So what the FAA has promised us is that they are going to improve, I'll say it that way because it's already existing, a website that will have the basic press release, for lack of a better term, when these places come online with this new infrastructure. So I've been watching for that. They're working on it. It's still not a good enough location to be able to tell everybody where we can see that, but once it goes live, we will send that information out to you and let you know. So the other big issue that is part of all this stuff, we are also getting more weather camera locations, and that's a great thing. Some of these camera locations are 360 degrees. Some of them are still 4 camera angles, but they're wide enough angle that we do have a 360 degree picture. It's just not a stitched together single image. We're also getting new ADSB ground stations. I've noticed the Galena ground station has been transmitting sporadically as they bring that station online. Allakaket, when I've been flying in that part of the state, I have not seen that one just yet, but my understanding it is online as well. Air traffic control anticipates that they will be able to have access and full use of those ADSB ground stations by the end of this calendar year. So we should see some improved IFR access in some of these locations for those of you that operate IFR. For those of you that have ADSB in, you should start to see better coverage when it comes to the FISB data, the Flight Information Service broadcast. You should be able to see more coverage for that information. Okay, so marking things off the list here as we keep going. Some of these are a little bit out of order, but just for the sake of making sure I cover all of them, I'm going to do them in the order that I've got them on my talking point sheet. I want to say it was a great time to be in Juneau a few weeks ago. The Airmen's Association had a member gathering down in Juneau. A lot of people attended. I think I lost count at around 70 people were there. Really good to interact and meet a lot of our members in the southeast part of the state. I got a lot of great feedback on some issues that are working down in southeast Alaska. I've added them to my list. Some of them I was already working, and it was good to hear some updates from a lot of you there in the Juneau area. So say thanks again for your hospitality while we were there. It was great to be there. A wonderful weather day in Juneau in the summertime. It was really, really enjoyable to be there. I had a little issue trying to come back home. Commercial flights, wound up having to go all the way to Seattle to get to Fairbanks. It's a long, long story. And it was a long, long flight. But anyway, it was well worth the trip, well worth the hassle to come and go. And again, thank you to all of you in the Juneau area in Southeast Alaska that showed up for that member barbecue a few weeks ago. Some of the other things that have happened since we've last talked: Senator Sullivan, during the August recess, came to Alaska and brought some folks with him, as he typically has done through the past few years, and had another aviation safety summit. You probably saw some of that in the news. I was invited to participate in that summit. I was part of one of the presenters of that safety summit and offer some feedback from the Alaska Airmen's perspective. It was very well attended. We had Chair of the NTSB, Jennifer Hamady, was there. We had the Regional Administrator of the FAA, Eric Amand, was there. And then we had DOT Commissioner Ryan Anderson was there. The FAA also brought in some headquarters level folks from Washington, D.C. to be in the room to hear firsthand some of the things that were being said. So thanks to Eric, the Regional Administrator, and his team for making that happen, because we can say these things, but if the right people don't hear them, it doesn't go very far. So it was a very successful time to get together and talk about some issues, bring some exposure to some of our concerns to the people who can actually do something about it. Some of the points that I made in my presentation was that infrastructure that is outside the control and outside the influence of the FAA is impacting our ability to meet the goals of the Don Young Alaska Aviation Safety Initiative. That's where some of this generational, once-in-a-generation funding is coming from for enhancement in our system here in Alaska. And what do I mean by that? Well, village power is a big issue. We are realizing that some of the locations we were hoping to put weather stations, we're having to go back and reconsider because there's not consistent, reliable, sufficient electrical power to run the infrastructure. And the FAA can't fix that. And so it was important for Senator Sullivan to hear that. His team took a lot of notes about these comments and these issues. Some of the other things that are outside the FAA's control is communication infrastructure, like we saw with the outage that happened back on July 27th. My understanding is that was not an FAA problem. That was something in that chain of events that occurred, and it took the FAA a little while to overcome that. Now, I will tell you that the FAA is able to bring in some redundant and backup systems between just regular copper lines, which we're going away from copper wire to be able to communicate now with now going to fiber optics. Then Starlink is a potential backup for a lot of locations, and the FAA has deployed a lot of Starlink units, and that's been encouraging to see the robustness that brings to the communication infrastructure. And then in some locations, they're able to add a cellular modem and be able to basically do a Wi-Fi hotspot from the cell phone network to be able to get that data out of that village. So the FAA is working with these things and trying to come up with some better solutions, but it is a little difficult, and some of the things that are broken are things that the FAA has no power or ability to remedy. And so that was one of my biggest points that I made at that safety summit. The other big issue that I talked about was a true GPS resiliency plan. Now, what does that mean, Adam? Well, you know, we are very dependent on GPS, and I have to get a different pen here. This one I left the cap off of and it dried out. We are very dependent on GPS. We all know that GPS is very fragile as far as a signal, and it's very easy to interfere with. We know that the military continues to do a lot of interference testing, they call it, jamming, for lack of a better term, as part of their training regime. And we have gone on record with the Alaska Airmen's Association supporting the military's need to train with GPS being denied. So we get that, we understand that. But what is the backup plan? What is the resiliency for our navigation infrastructure if GPS goes away? The Don Young Alaska Aviation Safety Initiative was supposed to address that. And I say was because right now the focus is on weather systems, and you know, we have to kind of do what we can as we can, And so right now the focus is on weather systems, but I brought up the GPS resiliency plan to say, hey, I know we're not there yet. I know this is part of the plan, but we really need to buckle down and figure out how we can be resilient in our navigation when we lose GPS. And so great conversation on that issue as well. The other point that I brought up was the military airspace expansion proposal that the military has come out with. Right now we are, the military's in the scoping phase of that proposal. They took some public comments a few months back, and now they're working through those comments to try to figure out how they can bring their proposal back to the public for comment. The military needs to be able to train. We as aviators understand the value and the benefit of consistent real-world scenario type training. Military needs to do the same thing. How do we do that in light of needing access to our rural communities and to the backcountry and other parts of the state when we have airspace concerns? So I brought that up to say that when the time comes, we are looking forward to a phrase that I use a lot, a robust comment period. The senator took great notes on that issue as well, and look forward to seeing how that progresses. So back to Oshkosh a little bit. It was a great time. I was there for 3 days, and it was kind of hot and muggy, a little bit smoky. I gotta admit though, everybody was really complaining about the smoke. They haven't experienced an interior Alaska summer with smoke. Yes, the visibilities were reduced. Yes, you could smell the smoke. But it wasn't an interior Alaska summer smoke season. So anyway, just to say that. You've probably heard a lot of people complain about the smoke and the Fisk arrival. There's all kinds of YouTube videos, and I've been watching them, and some of them are kind of scary, I'll admit. Some of them are kind of humorous. All of them very enlightening and very educational about what happens in smoke when you have a lot of people trying to do the same arrival. You remember I talked about I was going to do a presentation at Oshkosh. That went very well, had a lot of people in the room. Matter of fact, all the seats were taken and folks were standing up. A lot of great questions. The topic of my presentation was basically challenges of flying in Alaska. A lot of folks talk about flying to and from Alaska, but my presentation was more about the challenges of flying in Alaska. And we talked about a wide range of things. I left it open for comments and questions to kind of direct the conversation because I wanted to make sure people were getting their concerns addressed. And so it went very, very well. A lot of great conversation even after that presentation. Was able to talk to Garmin and ForeFlight specifically about georeferencing procedures, VFR routes and procedures here in and out of some towered areas, Fairbanks and Anchorage specifically. Talked about some procedures down in Southeast Alaska as well, maybe even some of the areas out in the YK Delta like Bethel. We talked about that as well. So both of those companies, I was talking to the engineer that was in charge of implementing that FA data into their individual products. So two different companies, two different conversations, two different groups of people I was talking with. But I was very impressed that I was able to get to the person at both companies that is responsible for integrating that data into their products, and was able to explain the issue, explain our concerns, take them and show them where the data was available on the FAA's website, and got a very positive response from both companies. I'm still following up that conversation after the fact and helping them find the right people within the FAA to get that data from and to do that. So I've got high hopes that we'll be able to see some improvements in those products and the information that's presented here in Alaska. The other thing that I was able to talk to was, ForeFlight has a weather camera layer on their product, and you may notice that they don't have all the same cameras that the weather camera website has. And so we talked about that issue, and they're going to work to see what they can do to improve that side of their product as well. Attended lots of presentations about the 100 low lead to unleaded fuel transition. Had a lot of great conversations outside of those forums. I was able to talk to a lot of the fuel providers and the people within those companies. A lot of really good conversations. If you want to see kind of a recap of what happened there, AvWeb has a really good article, and I'll put the link in the description of how you can find that article and be able to read that to kind of get a good recap of what happened there. Wow, I've still got a lot of things to talk about, and we're already 25 minutes into the update. The 100 low-lead transition plan was released by the FAA right before Oshkosh, and that was intentional. They were kind of playing into the media hype of Oshkosh and being able to get that information out there. And I've read through that plan. It doesn't say very much about specifics. There's a lot of unanswered questions yet. There's some talk of how they're going to change their program a little bit for that transition plan. There's a lot of conversation back and forth as to what is 2030. Is it a deadline? Is it a goal? There's a lot of things being talked about. Just know that I myself personally and on behalf of the Airmen's Association am very engaged in that conversation, and our concerns are being seriously considered and taken into account to the highest level of this transition plan. I was able to talk face-to-face to the key principal people on the Eagle Forum, and they recognized me by sight. They knew me by name. We had great conversations there at Oshkosh about this. If you notice and you look in the transition plan, Alaska is being dealt with very specifically in that transition plan. So all that to say, and it's not just me that's doing this, but there's others here in Alaska that are part of that as well. The Alaska Air Carriers Association, Will Day, and some other folks there. The Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association has been very actively involved, Tom George. And then EAA themselves, Mr. Rob Hackman, who I've known for, again, decades, is leading up their side of that as well. And so Alaska, our concerns and our issues are being accounted for and is not going to be swept under the rug. So that's great. All right, some other things just real quick to wrap up. A lot of folks have asked what's the status of the flight service stations that have been closed for the summer. What's some more details and information on that? I will tell you that there is no public estimate on when services will be restored. The official word is that reduced staffing will continue for the foreseeable future. And I'm reading that specifically because I want to get it right and I don't want to put words in the FAA's mouth, but that is the official response right now. What does this mean? What is my prediction on this? I doubt that we will see these flight service stations come online this summer. And now we're going to go into a winter season where they were already seasonal to begin with, some of them, and will they come back next summer? Some of them might, some of them may not. We don't know yet. And it's because of a staffing issue, because if you remember, the whole thing started because of some time card discrepancies and some travel reimbursement concerns that came out of an investigation from the Department of Transportation, the federal level of that, even outside of the FAA. And there were mid-20s as far as the number of folks who were put on administrative leave. And as of now, it is my understanding that no one has been brought back. That investigation is still ongoing, and we don't know the official outcome of that investigation. So we're still working that, still keeping an update on that. I will tell you that the FAA is pushing and reminding folks and helping people kind of get into the pipeline for a non-federal weather observation program. And again, I'm referencing my notes to make sure I get it right, which is a stopgap measure, essentially, to allow commercial operators and airport sponsors, the phrase that the FAA uses, which essentially here in Alaska means Alaska DOT, because there's just a handful of municipal airports in the state. But there is a path forward to be able to have a backup to a flight service station and then an AWOS or ASOS unit to have a certified weather observer on site. The problem with that is it takes a couple of months to complete that training and certification, and it costs around $5,000 per person to take that training and to get certified. Now, who bears the cost of that? And how long is it going to take to get folks certified as a backup to all these things? And the reason why these questions are important is because We've already seen it where commercial flights have been canceled because there's no flight service station that's open with somebody there in person. It's being remoted, and there's a problem with the automated weather system. And so there's nobody there to actually know what the weather is, and without the weather, you can't get the terminal forecast, and without all these things, commercial flights can't operate. So the FAA is trying to be proactive now to figure out how to keep going with some of these things. So that's the update on that. Just some other general FAA news may not be of interest to you, but the Deputy Administrator for the FAA, Chris Rocheleau, has now gone back to the civilian world and back to his General Aviation roots. And he is gone back to being the Chief Operating Officer for the National Business Aircraft Association, which is where he came from before going to work for the FAA. So he is moving back and transitioning there. So we'll see what happens with a new Deputy Administrator for the FAA moving forward. Anchorage noise study, the Anchorage International Noise Study is continuing to go. There's another meeting here at the end of the month. The Alaska Airmen's Association has been part of that conversation from the very beginning. Not much to report on that issue. Three things I want to remind you of as we wrap up, because we've gone long this month, but there's been a lot of things to talk about. I'm in a lot of meetings. I talk to a lot of FAA personnel and to the NTSB and to state DOT, and I'm in a lot of conversations. And there's things I pick up on. There's trends that I notice and that I see. There's things that will pop up here, and then seemingly unrelated, the similar issue will pop up in another conversation, in another meeting with totally different people. And so I will tell you that I see this as one of the great benefits of what I do. I am working across different lines of businesses within the FAA, talking to different folks within the federal government in different things, but like between the FAA and the NTSB and the Government Accountability Office and statewide aviation at Alaska DOT and Fish and Game and Bureau of Land Management and all these different things that I'm involved with and I see. And so it's pretty easy for me to start to see some trends. Sometimes these trends are a little troubling. Sometimes I'm able to take the information that I have kind of come and put together and then take it to folks and say, hey, are you aware that this is going on within your organization but in a different line of business? And sometimes, oh yeah, we're coordinating with them, and then kind of makes me scratch my head because it seems like maybe there could be better coordination. Other times they're like, nope, we're totally on it. Here's what we're doing. And I'm like, oh, cool. Okay, good. I didn't know that. Glad to know. Thanks for the information. Other times, folks will come to me and say, hey, can you help us understand what's going on down the hall? And more than willing to have all of those conversations. Here's some things that I have put together that you need to know, that you can do better with, and that you can be a part of the solution. So I'm going to mention three things, and I'm going to challenge you to do better, okay? The first one is, when was the last time, or have you ever read AC 91-92, Advisory Circular 91-92? And you're like, Adam, I have no idea what that is. Well, you may know it as the Pilot's Guide to a Pre-Flight Briefing. It came out in, a few years ago, 2021, I think it was, maybe. And it's a guide on how to do a good pre-flight briefing. Talks about calling flight service. It talks about using third-party apps. It talks about going and looking at websites and getting information and what places should you be going and what information should you be looking for. It's a good resource. Now, I will tell you, that publication was out of date before the ink was dry because of the world that we live in. Technology changes, information availability changes, all that stuff. So it's a good resource. It's a good place to start. When was the last time you read it? If you haven't read it, read it. If it's been a while, read it. If you think you know everything that's in it, read it to make sure. So I'll put a link in the description on where to find that. But I encourage you to read AC 91-92. Here's the second thing. When was the last time you did a for real, legit check on the NOTAMs? Here's why I'm saying this. I fly a lot. I go back and forth on all kinds of different places around the state, flying in an aircraft myself. I check NOTAMs. I do some things. I'll admit, I have been surprised a couple of times this summer when I've gotten to a place and I'm like, I didn't know that that was the case. And I go back and check my notes and like, that NOTAM came out while I was en route. And like, oh, I should have checked with flight service before I came all the way out here to see what might have changed. So I admit I can do better myself in this area as well. But I will tell you, I constantly hear people on the radio that are doing things and I'm like, ooh, you just told on yourself, sir, because you did not check NOTAMs. If you had checked NOTAMs, you would know that you can't do what it is that you're saying you're about to do over the radio. Some people are better at reminding their fellow pilots about that than others. I've heard some conversations on the radio this summer that were a little spicy, to say the least, about folks doing some things. Most of you know that I'm sitting here in the hangar in Nenana right now. If I'm here around the hangar, I usually have the door open, listening to the CTAF and what's happening and what's going on. We've got some construction here at Nenana right now. They're replacing all the runway lights, which I am so excited to have new runway lights coming into the winter. But because of that, they're closed. The runway is closed, and some other things that are happening with different ways to taxi around the airport to get to fuel and all that kind of stuff. Still able to come and go because we have a ski strip, a grass runway that we can use when the main runway is closed, all these things. All that to say that I have noticed that people are not checking NOTAMs. I'll admit that I really agree with former chair of the NTSB, Richard Sumwalt, who said that basically NOTAMs are a pile of garbage. Now, that was a statement he made many years ago. The FAA is doing a lot of work right now to improve the NOTAM system. It's under a major overhaul right now. You may have noticed some different changes in the third-party apps and how they display NOTAMs and all of those things. So it's getting better. It's getting better. But people are still not checking NOTAMs, and they are getting themselves in situations that they should not be in, because if they had known beforehand, which they had the ability to know, but they just didn't check. So do me a favor. I've talked enough about it. Check your NOTAMs. Check them before you fly. Check them while you're flying. Keep up on them. If there's a place that you go routinely, make that part of your morning routine. When you're reading, doing your thing in the morning, drinking your coffee, doing whatever, do a NOTAM check. It's part of your normal weather check, all those things. So enough about that one. So the last thing I want to remind you to do is, when was the last time you read NTSB 830? Some of you may be thinking, I don't know what that is, Adam. Well, okay. Do a search on the internet for NTSB 830. Basically, that's the document that tells you what you need to do in the case of an incident or an accident. What is a reportable event? Who do you report it to? How much time do you have to be able to report it? Who do you call? What do you do with the aircraft? There's a lot of things that are in that document that you need to be refreshed on. Here's the reason why I say it. There's been a lot of events that have happened this summer that I've heard about that the FAA hasn't heard about. Now, people think, well, I don't want the FAA to know, I don't want to get in trouble, this and that and the other. Okay, I get it, but still, the reason why that information is important, because it helps us learn from people's misfortune or mistakes and make sure that we put things in place to better train. Maybe there's an AD that needs to be issued because of a failure that's becoming more and more common, but we don't know what's happening because nobody's talking about it. And then what do you do with the airplane? Sometimes that's airplanes are damaged and all of a sudden they just disappear. Now they're in somebody's hangar getting fixed and nobody knew anything about it. I get the embarrassment side of things. Our pride is very fragile as pilots. I understand that. But read NTSB 830. Read it. Figure out what needs to be done. There's a reason why it's in there, and it's not because Big Brother wants to punish you, okay? There's a lot of value and benefits that happen when you read and understand NTSB 830. So That's the last thing I want to remind you of. We've gone way over, twice as long as a normal update, and I apologize for that, but I'm not sorry. There's a lot of information that we needed to talk about, a lot of good things that are happening, and again, it's all because of your membership in the Alaska Airmen's Association that allows me to be able to go and interface and do these things. So thank you for that. I appreciate your input. I appreciate your involvement. I appreciate your feedback. So thanks for watching. Look forward to seeing you. Look forward to hearing you on the radio, talking to you wherever we may meet. And be careful, folks. We'll see you next time.